Hey guys, tonight we're sinking into one of the strangest little myths tucked quietly into the folds of Greek mythology, so quietly, in fact, that most people miss it entirely. Picture this: the mighty Apollo, sun god, lyre strummer, healer, plague bringer, all-around golden boy of Olympus, suddenly decides to start a cow farm. Not a metaphor, not a symbolic cosmic order kind of thing. An actual, honest-to-Zeus cow farm. With mooing, grazing, and an overwhelming lack of celestial drama. You can already feel your muscles softening, your thoughts slowing. You, dear traveler, are about to stroll behind Apollo as he walks sun-drenched fields of Thessaly in search of cows. Not glory, not worshippers, cows. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere far-flung or just want to share your sleep vibes, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little journey stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in the quiet groves of ancient Greece. The morning air smells like warm stone and laurel leaves. Somewhere, a bee hums lazily past your ear. Apollo, still dressed in the remnants of his ceremonial robes, sunlight catching in the embroidery, has just had an epiphany. Not the oracular kind, the vacation kind. He's tired, you see, tired of the harp recitals, the endless temple prayers, the unsolicited plague requests from small villages who really should have prayed harder. Even gods need hobbies, and after what historians assume was an aggressively long week, Apollo wants a break. Not a dramatic retreat, not a glamorous escape to Mount Olympus spa level. No, he wants the kind of peace that only rustic, earthy cow farming can provide. Of course, farming is not exactly Apollo's wheelhouse. He's all aesthetics and poetry and piercing stares that can shatter the confidence of the most seasoned Spartan. But there's something undeniably charming about his commitment. He squints at the rolling fields of Thessaly, one hand shading his divine eyes, and muses aloud. How hard can cows be? You trudge along beside him, sandals crunching softly against dry grass. Around you, shepherds are minding their flocks, too occupied to notice the solar deity attempting to calculate the appropriate ratio of grazing land to cow. Apollo has brought a scroll. Naturally, it contains zero useful information, mostly haikus about sunrises. Still, the idea warms you. Apollo is a farmer, healing wounds by day, milking cows by twilight, maybe writing a dramatic ode to utter symmetry. It's oddly peaceful. Now, from a historical standpoint, you're standing in an area famous for pastoral agriculture. Thessaly, the breadbasket of ancient Greece, with lush valleys and a long history of cattle breeding. And while no real archaeological evidence confirms Apollo ever actually ranched cattle there, because, well, he's a myth, it's a lovely thought to entertain. Historians, being the very serious bunch that they are, still argue whether this odd myth reflects some forgotten ritual of pastoral initiation, or if it's simply an elaborate cosmic dad joke. You and Apollo crest a low hill. Below, a few cows amble by a stream, tails flicking lazily. Apollo's eyes light up. You can practically hear the soft harp glissando that always seems to accompany his minor revelations. He nods to himself, declares, "Yes, that one," and starts clambering downhill in a deeply undignified way for someone whose chariot rides the sky. You do your best to keep up, dodging a surprisingly aggressive beetle and wondering how this serene little adventure will unfold. A god and his cows. What could go wrong? Well, quite a lot, actually, but that's for later. For now, Apollo reaches the stream, startles the cows, and attempts to introduce himself. Loudly, with a sonnet. The cows, unimpressed by meter or rhyme, wander off. Apollo frowns. You can tell he's making mental notes, probably planning to compose a cow-attracting song. Maybe something in Dorian mode with a rustic twist. And then, something shifts. One cow, sleek, cinnamon-colored, with a slightly judgmental gaze, suddenly turns around and trots off in the wrong direction. Apollo, blinking, watches it go. Moments later, two more cows follow, then three. Then the entire small herd is wandering away, hooves making surprisingly little sound in the soft grass. Apollo blinks again. I hadn't started yet, he says. You, wisely, do not point out that cows are not known for poetic timing. Still, there's something odd here. The cows aren't just wandering. They're marching in a very particular path. And their hoofprints? They're going backward. You and Apollo lock eyes. You say nothing. He raises a golden brow. And somewhere, not too far away, a baby god smirks in his cradle. But we're not there yet. Instead, Apollo gazes after his mysteriously migrating cattle. His pastoral dreams already slipping into divine inconvenience. I feel a song coming on. He murmurs. You nod sagely. It's probably a slow ballad about betrayal and bovine disinterest. The sun begins to dip low over the hills, casting long shadows. A warm wind tugs gently at your tunic. The cows vanish into the grove ahead. And just like that, Apollo's quiet cow farming sabbatical becomes something far stranger. And infinitely more exhausting. You continue following Apollo, who is now equal parts intrigued and slightly miffed. His sandals, custom, radiant, very impractical for farming, are getting mud-streaked. The cows, meanwhile, have left behind an absurd trail of backward hoofprints that wind through olive groves and around fig trees like some ancient bovine prank. Apollo's long strides make it difficult for you to keep up. He mutters to himself as he walks. Backward footprints, a sign, perhaps? A prophecy in hooves? You consider suggesting that not everything is a prophecy. But then think better of it. Still, something feels off, even for ancient Greece, a place where turning into a swan to flirt was considered fairly normal. This is pushing it. Apollo reaches a bend in the path and stops cold. You nearly bump into him. There, in the soft earth, the hoofprints vanish entirely, poof, like the cows simply stepped off reality. Which, given the divine climate of the day, isn't out of the question. He crouches to inspect the ground. Apollo, mind you, isn't much for crouching. He's a lounging, reclining sort of deity, so this moment of focused cow tracking is notable. Then comes the odd part. Instead of looking confused, he smiles. Clever, he says, softly. Infuriating, but clever. You're about to ask who he's talking about when a faint whiff of roasted thyme and something musical hits your nose. It smells like a poorly supervised birthday party. Across the fields, just visible on a ridge, smoke curls into the sky. Not thick smoke, cheerful smoke, like someone's cooking dinner, possibly on a stolen sacrificial fire. Now, if we pause for a moment, don't worry. You're still very much walking. Because in second-person narratives you never really stop, this entire setup rings a bell in certain classical circles. See, the myth of Apollo and the cows is one of the earliest stories of Hermes. Yes, that Hermes, messenger god, sandal-wearing speedster, god of commerce, thieves, and conveniently, livestock-related shenanigans. At this point in the tale, Hermes is literally a newborn. Not in the, he's very young and cute, way. In the, he crawled out of the womb this morning and has already stolen 50 cows, kind of way. Historians still argue whether Hermes' hyper-accelerated babyhood represents an allegory of cunning, or if the Greeks just really enjoyed chaos. Personally, as you stumble through a thistle patch and Apollo scowls at a confused squirrel, you suspect it's both. Back to the trail, Apollo strides up the ridge, clearly ready to confront whoever is roasting thyme-scented mischief for dinner. You trail behind, eyeing the horizon where Mount Silene rises, quiet and stately. According to fringe interpretations, Silene might have once hosted obscure cults who viewed Hermes not just as a trickster but as a cosmic reset button, scrambling divine hierarchies for sport. The kind of minor footnote only professors with wild eyebrows argue over in sleepy symposia. As you crest the hill, the source of the smoke becomes clear, a tiny stone cottage. The sort of place where a nymph might knit socks or a minor god might host interpretive harp night. Outside the door, suspiciously normal for this mythical setting, sits a very satisfied-looking cow. Just one. Apollo halts, tilts his head. His expression is unreadable, somewhere between, I'm about to smite someone, and, I need a snack. Then the door creaks open. A figure steps out, clutching a wooden ladle and humming an incredibly off-key tune. It's a baby. A literal baby, wrapped in cloth, tufts of hair sticking out at odd angles. With the world's most self-satisfied expression, you exchange a glance with Apollo, who blinks. then glances at the cow. The cow stares blankly. Hermes, because yes, this oddly smug infant is Hermes, gurgles with mischief. The wooden ladle falls with a soft clink at his feet. Now, from a logical standpoint, there is no universe in which this baby could have stolen a herd of cattle and reversed their footprints. But this isn't logic's universe. It's myth, and myth runs on vibes and questionable alibis. Apollo, sensing the surreal, softens his tone. Nice cow, he says diplomatically. Hermes yawns, loudly. Apollo clears his throat. It's mine, actually. Hermes coos, and then, gasp, sucks his thumb. You can practically see Apollo's divine patience stretch like an overcooked barley cake. You're not fooling anyone, he mutters. This scene, strange as it is, has a grain of something historians love to nibble on: divine satire. The Greeks didn't always worship their gods with awe. Sometimes, they chuckled. Myths like this remind us that even the sun god can get trolled by a celestial toddler. You step back a little, just in case Apollo decides to channel a sunbeam through his forehead. But no smiting comes. Instead, Apollo picks up the ladle, sniffs it. Did you cook my cow? Hermes giggles. Then, impossibly articulate for someone who cannot yet sit up, says, prove it. You choke slightly on your own breath. Apollo's nostrils flare. This, you realize, is not going to be a normal farm startup. You can already picture the divine paperwork this'll require. In the fading sunlight, the baby Hermes toddles back inside, muttering something about liars and legal representation. Apollo turns to you, deadpan. I miss the cows already. He sighs. You nod in sympathy. Somewhere in the distance, a goat sneezes, and the farm dream, so peaceful, so pastoral, starts to feel a little less simple. Apollo, once full of rustic optimism, now stands in the doorway of a suspiciously cozy cottage, contemplating whether he's just been outwitted by a drooling newborn. You step in beside him, half expecting the inside to smell like singed ambrosia or divine diapers. Instead, it smells like freshly baked barley cakes, and a hint of deception. The interior is small and snug, walls made of polished stone. Bundles of herbs hanging overhead. And in the corner, a makeshift crib carved from olive wood. It looks like something a pastoral influencer would post on Mount Olympus's version of Instagram. Hermes, wrapped in a loose swaddle, lies sprawled on a fleece mat, cradling what can only be described as a lyre. Yes, a lyre. And not just any lyre, but one strung from the stretched shell of a turtle and sinews that, frankly, you hope did not come from your missing cows. Apollo blinks. I was gone for one afternoon. Hermes smiles serenely, strumming the lyre with stubby fingers. The tune, infuriatingly, is lovely. You feel your eyelids flutter. Is it lullaby magic? Is this how he plans to escape punishment? By gently lulling the sun god to sleep with celestial jazz. Apollo shakes himself. Right, focus. Where are the rest of my cows? Hermes, now fully committing to his role as divine chaos incarnate, gives an elaborate shrug that somehow includes both innocence and smug defiance. I don't know what cows are, he says, the words rolling out with the silkiness of a well-rehearsed child actor. I'm just a baby. You catch a laugh in your throat. Even Apollo snorts. Just once, the god crouches beside Hermes, careful not to crease his shimmering robe, and inspects the lyre. This is new, he murmurs. And indeed, this is the first appearance of Hermes' lyre, an instrument he supposedly invented that very day. Scholars still marvel at this sudden act of musical innovation, suggesting that the lyre's construction from tortoise shell and cow gut is symbolic of Hermes' mastery over both craft and mischief. Others argue it's just the ancient Greek version of giving your baby a drum set to keep him busy. You watch Apollo's fingers hover over the strings. He strums. A clean, golden note shivers through the air. You made this? Hermes nods. Turtle was very cooperative. You don't ask follow-up questions. You definitely don't ask where he got the strings. Apollo sits back, clearly torn. On the one hand, he's a god wronged. On the other, he's holding one of the most beautiful instruments he's ever heard, made by a celestial infant who, technically, shouldn't be able to speak yet. He sighs. You stole my cows. I borrowed them, Hermes corrects gently, and gave them new life. In music, you and Apollo both glance around the room. No cows. Just baby blankets and some incredibly smug vibes. Outside, birds chirp innocently. A breeze stirs the time bundles overhead. Somewhere, a beetle bumps into a wall and reconsiders its choices. Then, Zeus arrives. Not with thunder, not with lightning, just a soft golden shimmer and a faint smell of aged oak and politics. He appears in the doorway, arms crossed, an eyebrow arched like a diplomatic question mark. Having fun? He asks, his voice more amused than accusatory. Apollo stands. Your son stole my cows. Hermes coos. Allegedly. Zeus chuckles. He's not even a full day old. Which makes it worse. Apollo snaps. He's already a menace. Now, here's where the myth takes a turn toward theatrical arbitration. Zeus, ever the meddling mediator, suggests a trial, not in a court of law, mind you, but in the rustic barn behind the cottage. You didn't see a barn earlier. But this is myth logic. Barns appear when plot requires them. You, Apollo, Hermes, swaddled dramatically like a very small defendant, and Zeus step into the makeshift courtroom. It smells like goat. There are, in fact, goats. They've gathered to observe. You suspect at least one is a witness. Hermes is propped up on a stack of hay, holding his lyre like a legal exhibit. Zeus acts as judge, jury, and occasional peanut gallery. Apollo presents his case with the solemnity of a divine TED Talk. He describes the backward footprints, the missing herd, the suspiciously gifted musical prodigy. Hermes rebuttals with a yawn and a brief performance of a new tune titled, Ode to a Misunderstood Infant. You think the goats like it? Zeus strokes his beard. So, you took the cows. Invented an instrument. Cooked one of them? Hermes gestures vaguely. Only the least musical one. A historical tidbit worth noting. Many scholars believe this myth was designed to explain the origins of the lyre and why it became Apollo's signature instrument. Despite being created by Hermes, some suggest it reflects the tension between instinctive creativity, Hermes, and structured artistry, Apollo. Others think it was simply the world's oldest sibling rivalry. Dressed in sandals and harp strains. After a moment of thoughtful silence, Zeus delivers his verdict. Give him the lyre, he says to Hermes, and maybe, give back the cows? Hermes considers, what if I just give most of them back? Apollo opens his mouth, closes it, rubs his temples. Fine. The trade is made. Apollo gets his cows, most of them. Hermes gifts the lyre, along with a wink and the faintest gurgled warning, I have ideas. You escort Apollo back down the hill. The lyre cradled gently in his arms like an ancient Greek banjo baby. The sun's dipped low now. Long shadows stretching like lazy dogs. Cows low in the distance. Just audible over the whisper of evening wind. Apollo, for all his composure, is clearly still baffled. He's a baby. He mutters for the 6th time. You pat his shoulder. Welcome to fatherhood, you say. He groans. You and Apollo walk in silence for a bit. The path now golden with the last light of day. The cows, newly retrieved, shuffle ahead with what can only be described as mild indifference. Like they know this whole divine dispute barely concerned them. Apollo is brooding, not angry. Exactly. Just quietly devastated that his glorious pastoral vision has been reduced to a lyrical custody battle over livestock. In one arm, he holds the lyre. In the other, a scroll of hastily scribbled cow management theories that now seems faintly embarrassing. The cows have not offered an apology. You reach a clearing surrounded by laurel trees. Their pale green leaves rustling gently. Apollo stops here, planting his feet in the dry soil as if trying to root himself in this ridiculous reality. He surveys the cows again, this time with less awe and more suspicion. And that's when he notices the tracks. Hoof prints. Again, but this time, they're normal. Well, mostly. One cow, a speckled fellow with a slight limp and a constant look of existential dread, appears to have walked in sideways. Another seems to have gone in circles before continuing straight. Apollo stares at the mess of prints. Then up at you. They're mocking me, he says flatly. You tilt your head. The cows? Apollo sighs. Yes. You can't entirely dismiss the idea. He squats down to examine the soil, fingers brushing the impressions. They're all wrong, he mutters. They weren't here yesterday. These tracks go in reverse. Again, you both look at the cows. They look back, chewing slowly, as if to say, prove it. Of course. This time Hermes isn't nearby. No smug toddler peeking from behind a tree. No divine courtroom full of bleeding spectators. Just cows, chewing, mooing, pretending they don't know how to gaslight a god. And this, dear listener, is where myth and metaphor begin to blend. You see, there's a fringe interpretation, largely ignored by the mainstream classical community but fiercely championed by a handful of sandal-wearing scholars in Thessaloniki, that Hermes didn't actually steal the cows the first time. He simply convinced Apollo he had. Backward hoofprints, confusing musical lullabies, selective cow memory. It all may have been one grand illusion. In this version, Hermes is less a thief and more a trickster illusionist, bending divine perception like a reflective shield in sunlight. Apollo straightens, brushing dirt from his robe. "We'll follow them," he says, resolutely. You sigh. "Of course you will." And so, the two of you begin the divine cow hunt, again. But unlike last time, the trail is stranger. The hoofprints don't just meander. They loop, spiral, double back. One set climbs a small boulder and stops cold, as if the cow either took flight or simply ceased to exist for a moment. Apollo stares at that rock for a long time. "Do you think they're developing teleportation?" he asks. You open your mouth, close it. Eventually, you shrug. The sun disappears fully now, replaced by a soft twilight glow. The sky turns periwinkle. Crickets begin their nightly hum, sounding eerily like slow applause. And there, nestled in a patch of thyme and goa tweed, you spot something odd, a small, polished stone tablet, no writing, just a simple, carved symbol, an eye, winking. Apollo picks it up. "Hermes," he mutters. You sit on a log, trying to pretend this is all part of the natural rhythms of early Greek agriculture. Now, let's pause and inject a bit of historical trivia to keep the vibes earthy and mildly educational. Backward hoofprints, while clearly fictional in this context, were a real part of ancient storytelling. Many cultures used reversed tracks in tales of witches, spirits, or clever thieves. They symbolized subversion of natural law, of divine order, of logic itself. In Hermes' case, it's a prank wrapped in a metaphor wrapped in cowhide. Apollo, likely unaware of your internal TED Talk, is now playing the lyre. He strums absently, lost in thought. The sound is richer than expected, mournful, curious, touched with sunlight. "I don't think I'm cut out for this," he says. You look at the cows. One is licking a tree. "No," you agree gently. "Probably not." He sighs, resting the lyre across his knees. "I thought it would be simple. Land, animals, quiet, a place where no one prays to me for plague removal or asks for a divine matchmaking favor." You nod. You wanted a soft reset. Exactly. A gentle breeze carries the scent of wild oregano. Somewhere, an owl hoots. You and Apollo sit in stillness for a while. The cows begin to lie down in the grass. The stars bloom slowly above, one by one, and just as your eyes begin to droop, a new sound emerges, a soft clatter. Like pebbles tumbling. You glance to the left. There, beside the stream, is a child-sized rock. Wearing a hat. You blink. It's a cairn, just a pile of rocks. Really, but it's been arranged in such a way that it's clearly meant to resemble Hermes. There's even a tiny scroll tied to its arm. Apollo groans before even opening it. The note reads, "The cows are learning. Good luck." No signature, just a faint smudge that smells vaguely of olive oil and mischief. You watch Apollo fold the note, press it to his temple, and lie back in the grass. "I give up," he says. One of the cows moos softly, like a lullaby. You lie beside him, the stars wheeling slowly overhead. It's been a long day in mythic livestock management. You wake to the soft sound of mooing and the not-so-soft sound of Apollo groaning into his own forearm. The night had been surprisingly peaceful. The cows, exhausted from their mysterious and possibly sentient wandering, slept in a gentle cluster nearby. One had even curled beside you like an affectionate boulder. Now, as dawn spills peach-colored light over the hills, Apollo is already sitting up and glaring at a leaf that dared to fall onto his lyre. "Let's try this again," he says, brushing off his robes. No more notes from Hermes. No more reverse-tracking cattle. Just cows. Just farming. You nod supportively, though you both know full well that Hermes doesn't respect resolve, or peace, or linear causality. You begin the morning routine. Apollo attempts to coax the cows into a rough grouping. He talks softly to them, as if they might respond to polite divine instruction. Stand there, please. No, there. Stop licking the olive tree. The cows do not listen. You try your hand at leadership. Here, cow, you say with all the confidence of someone who's never led a bovine anywhere. One cow snorts at you. Another sits down. You make eye contact with Apollo. Plan B? You offer? He sighs, reaches into a pouch, and pulls out a small reed flute. Let's see if they like music. Now, here's your historical tidbit of the day. Music and animals in ancient Greek lore had a long, curious relationship. Orpheus, the mythical bard, was said to charm wild beasts with his lyre. Shepherds often used panpipes not just for entertainment but for herding. Music, to the Greeks, was a bridge between human and natural world, except when cows were involved. Apollo plays a soft, rising tune full of warmth and sleepy joy. The cows continue to do absolutely nothing. One sneezes. Another lies down with such finality that you wonder if it's passive-aggressively pretending to die. Hermes has either cursed them or given them an extremely specific union contract. Apollo plays louder. You bob your head slightly, it's actually catchy. And then, out of nowhere, a voice calls from behind the olive trees. That one's flat. You both spin. There, striding toward you with the confidence of someone who's never heard the word boundary, is a tall woman in a pale blue chiton. She holds a lyre of her own and radiates that ethereal air of someone who knows how to critique without ever being critiqued. You recognize her instantly. Calliope, one of the muses. And not just any muse. The muse of epic poetry. The kind who once inspired Homer and probably corrected him mid-rhapsody. Apollo narrows his eyes. Why are you here? Calliope shrugs. We heard you were trying to be rustic. Who's we? Everyone. You look up and see 4 more muses cresting the hill. Their chitons trailing behind them like decorative napkins in a breeze. They each carry something. Scrolls. Flutes. A plate of olives. And in one case, what looks like a tambourine that's been enchanted to applaud. They gather around the field, forming an impromptu audience. One sits beside a cow and begins reciting what sounds like cow-themed haiku. Apollo pinches the bridge of his nose. Please tell me you're not here to help. We're muses, Calliope says, gesturing broadly. Helping means commenting poetically while others do the work. You sit beside a cow and whisper. This is getting out of hand. The cow flicks its tail at you and then promptly relieves itself near your sandal. Meanwhile, the muses have begun composing. One sings a ballad about Apollo's brief venture into agricultural life. Another sketches the cows in dramatic poses, titling her Drawing Cattle of Confusion, a study in divine regret. Apollo turns to you, eyes wide with restrained panic. This was supposed to be quiet. You nod solemnly. You wanted a farm. You got a festival. From a more analytical angle, the muses appearing here adds a layer of gentle satire to the myth. Their involvement hints at how creativity, whether musical, poetic, or mischief-laced, spreads like wildfire. Hermes made a lyre, and now the arts themselves are descending upon the pasture like a chorus of creative chaos. Historians still argue whether the muses' appearance was always part of this myth or if it was a later poetic addition, an embellishment by storytellers eager to sneak their patron goddesses into every narrative like divine cameos. Regardless, the field is now full of laughter, mild cow confusion, and spontaneous rhyming couplets. Apollo attempts to salvage the situation. Let's focus, he says, clapping his hands. We need to herd the cows. One muse grins. Herd them into a metaphor? Into a pen, he snaps. You try, once again, to lead the cows. You sing. You bribe them with barley. You speak gently, then sternly, then existentially. Nothing works. Finally, Apollo throws down his lyre and says, Fine, let's do it the divine way. He lifts his hands, mutters a spell so softly it sounds like a lullaby, and with a faint shimmer of golden light, the cows begin to float 2 inches off the ground and drift, gently, dreamily, into a tidy corral. The muses clap. The cows look bewildered. You lie back on the grass, exhausted by proxy. Why didn't you do that earlier, you ask? Apollo shrugs. I was trying to be humble. Calliope pats his shoulder. That's sweet. Don't ever try it again. You laugh softly, the sound swallowed by the wind. The sun is high now. The cows are penned. The muses are composing an ode to cow breath. And for a brief, shining moment, the farm almost feels normal. So there you are, surrounded by cows, poetry, and a surprising number of barefoot women reciting verse about cud. Apollo stands stiffly near the corral, watching his divine reputation melt under the relentless drizzle of poetic cow puns. Calliope is halfway through a lyric titled Heifer You Ever Loved a God, and one of the younger muses is experimenting with alliteration involving moo sounds. You hear melancholy moo murmurs of Mount Nisimash, and feel a small part of your soul detach and drift gently toward the sky. Apollo is not amused. Enough, he says, holding up one elegant, sun-glowing hand. Please, stop turning my pastoral crisis into interpretive art. The muses pause. One dramatically lowers her stylus. But it's so tragic. Calliope sighs. A god of light, trying to live among beasts. There's an entire second scroll in this. Apollo rubs his temples. You're making it worse. You can't help but agree. The cows are now restless. One is nosing at a lyre. Another has somehow gotten a laurel wreath stuck on its horn and is trying to chew it off with visible disappointment. Apollo waves the muses away, politely, divinely, but firmly. Thank you for your inspiration. Please go inspire someone else, preferably not involved in animal husbandry. The muses exchange knowing glances and, with a few graceful bows and a final haiku about hoofprints and humility, they retreat over the hill. The youngest muse leaves behind a tiny ceramic cow figurine on a stone. It stares at you for a long time, and then it blinks. You bury it under a rock. Now alone again, Apollo stretches and surveys the field. The cows are calm, for now. You spot one napping in the sun, another chewing meditatively on a fig branch it absolutely should not be eating. I need help, he finally admits. Real help. You nod slowly, trying not to say you think? Not poetic, he adds. Not musical, not mischievous. Practical. Someone who knows cows. You both stare at the quiet horizon for a moment. Then, as if summoned by ancient sitcom timing, a figure appears. She's tall, sunburned, wearing a tunic dusted with hay and absolutely zero patience. Her arms are roped with muscle from years of practical labor, and her hair is pulled into a bun so severe it could hold a chariot together. Her name, she announces, is Ptolemy. She is, in her words, not a muse, not a goddess, not interested in your celestial melodrama, and most importantly, I know cows. Apollo looks at you, stunned. You mouth, thank the fates. Ptolemy strides into the pasture with purpose. She claps twice. The cows look up. She whistles once. They stand. You and Apollo exchange a glance that says, she might actually be magic. I was a cowherd for King Adrastus. She explains. Then for Queen Althea. Then for a small, chaotic goat cult. But that's another story. You decide you very much want to hear that story. But Ptolemy's already inspecting the herd. She touches their flanks, checks their hooves, murmurs softly to one who appears emotionally overwhelmed. You've been overfeeding, she says, looking Apollo dead in the eye. And underwatering. Sacred cows are not. They need structure. Apollo nods sheepishly. I tried to play the music. She snorts. Unless that music sounds like a dinner bell. They don't care. You watch in awe as she begins organizing the herd, separating the young from the old, designating a grazing area, assigning each cow a gentle nickname like Big Eyes and Too Loud. Within minutes, the field is more orderly than it's ever been. Apollo follows her like a student. You follow Apollo like a tired stage manager. Here's your historical tidbit. While the Greeks rarely wrote about female laborers in detail, archaeology suggests women often played key roles in managing livestock, particularly in smaller, rural households. Figurines and frescoes show women milking cows, herding sheep, even managing markets. Ptolemy, while fictional, reflects a truth often overlooked in classical myth, the sheer, unromantic expertise of people who actually made the ancient world run. Ptolemy, noticing Apollo's divine glow, finally pauses. You a sun god or something? Yes, he replies, somewhat bashfully. She shrugs. Then make yourself useful and fetch water. Apollo blinks. What? You heard me. There's a spring. Down the hill. 2 jugs. Chop chop. You smile, maybe a little too broadly. Apollo glances at you with a betrayed expression, then trudges off. Once he's out of earshot, Tholome turns to you. He's got a good heart, she says. Terrible instincts, but he's trying. You nod. She adds, if he keeps this up, he might make a halfway decent assistant herder. The sun is now high overhead, the pasture drowsy and golden. The cows seem relaxed. One dozes under a fig tree, its nose twitching in a dream of, you hope, simpler days. Apollo returns, hauling the jugs with visible effort. Is this the right water? Tholome inspects it, nods. Good, now pour it slowly, clockwise, near their hooves. Keeps the flies off. Apollo follows her instructions with a grace you've never seen from him in battle. Music, or divine revenge. And for the first time, maybe ever, the god of the sun looks like he belongs in the quiet rhythm of farm life. The next morning begins not with drama, not with hoofprint mysteries or divine debates, but with the low, melodic groan of a cow waking up from what appears to have been a very satisfying nap. You rise slowly, blinking sunlight from your eyes. Apollo is already up, seated on a stone, playing the lyre softly. The tune is slower now, gentler. Less divine performance, more sleepy lullaby for livestock. And it seems to be working. One cow sighs contentedly. Another shifts its bulk with a heavy grunt and settles down again. The sun god has learned to play quietly, which is a kind of miracle on its own. Tholome enters the pasture with her usual no-nonsense energy, carrying a bundle of herbs and a look that could curdle milk. They're too relaxed, she says. Today we train. Apollo visibly pales. Train cows? Tholome tosses the herb bundle onto a flat stone. You want a farm? You need obedient cows, structured cows, cows that know when to walk, when to eat, and where not to relieve themselves. You resist the urge to glance at your sandal, still faintly stained from yesterday's surprise. The training begins. Tholome instructs Apollo to divide the cows into groups based on temperament. He squints at them, clearly trying to intuit divine moods from their blank stares. Eventually, he just points randomly. Tholome sighs and rearranges them herself. Over here, she says, are the calm ones. These 2 are biters. That one's a licker. These 3 follow any cow that walks past. And this one, she points to a shaggy, moo-prone beast with a tilted head, is either a genius or completely hollow inside. We don't know yet. You nod solemnly. Could be both. Tholome gives each group simple tasks. Walking in a circle. Standing still. Avoiding figs. You never realized how hard it is to train animals that have no interest in anything but grass and the occasional staring contest. Apollo tries a more musical method again, using different tones of the lyre to cue actions. It works about 30% of the time, which, for divine bovine education, is frankly excellent. You clap for him when one of the cows turns in the correct direction after a particularly high note. Tholome doesn't clap. She simply grunts and tosses him a pat of butter as a reward. Now, here's the weird part, because you knew there would be one. Midway through training, Apollo notices something odd about one of the cows. A golden mark on its flank. Subtle, but shimmering. He calls you over. Did you see this yesterday? He asks. You hadn't. And you were watching that cow pretty closely. It was the one that kept trying to headbutt your knee. Tholome sees it too. Frowns. That's not natural. Apollo hums thoughtfully. Maybe a blessing. Maybe a message. And maybe a signature? You both look at the mark again. It's faint, but resembles a tiny winged sandal. You exhale slowly. Hermes, you whisper. Apollo stares at the cow, who looks absolutely innocent, as if it hadn't once reversed its own hoofprints and possibly participated in time-looping mischief. The golden mark doesn't go away. It glimmers in the sun. Apollo folds his arms. Do you think he enchanted it? You shrug. It's Hermes. He probably enchanted everything. The grass, the milk, the air. You and Apollo return to the training session. But now you can't stop glancing back at that cow. It stands perfectly still. Too still. As if waiting. Later, during a break, Tholome offers some insight from her goat cult days. Yes. You finally asked. Some gods don't use symbols. They use symbols in things. Animals. Tools. You get a cow with a divine tag. It's either a gift, or a surveillance device. You nearly spit out your barley tea. You think we're being watched? Through a cow? Ptolemy raises an eyebrow. You think you're not? Apollo, meanwhile, is unfazed. Let him watch. He'll learn something. And with that, he begins a low whistle and walks a circle, leading the cows behind him like some sleepy Greek Pied Piper. You follow, more amused than concerned. But still, that marked cow, it's watching you now. Not Apollo. Not Ptolemy. You try waving. It doesn't blink. Now for your historical fact. Cows were more than just food or labor in ancient Mediterranean cultures. In many rituals, especially in Egypt and Mycenaean Greece, they were seen as sacred conduits, sometimes divine messengers, sometimes ritual participants. The idea that a god might mark or use a cow as a vessel? Not as ridiculous as it sounds. Still, you'd prefer your cattle not to be magical. Apollo finishes his herding circle and the cows, miraculously, stay in place. Ptolemy gives an approving grunt. Not bad. Godling. Apollo looks proud. He should be. For a solar deity who once scorched an entire city over an off-key hymn. He's showing remarkable patience. The sun dips low again. And the cows begin settling down. You and Apollo sit beneath an olive tree. Ptolemy nearby, oiling her boots with a mixture that smells strongly of beeswax and, don't ask. I think I'm getting it. Apollo says softly. The rhythm of it. Wake, walk, graze, rest. No temples, no prophecy. Just presence. You nod. You're farming. He smiles faintly. And no one's turned into a tree today. You raise your barley mug in a slow, sleepy toast. To progress. And somewhere behind you, the marked cow moos. Evening rolls in like a sleepy yawn across the sky. And with it comes that lovely honeyed light that makes everything, cows, goats, exasperated sun gods, look faintly more majestic than they really are. Apollo stands in the center of the pasture. Hair golden, face flushed, tunic dusted with dried grass, and a firm expression that says he's absolutely committed to pretending this is still a good idea. You're sitting cross-legged on a smooth rock, watching him attempt what might be his 10th cow-herding formation of the day. Okay, he says, pointing to one cow, then another. You're in the front. You, beside her. No pushing. No, don't eat her tail. For the love of, stand still. The cows ignore him. The goats, in contrast, are extremely attentive. They are, however, applying that attention to eating his instructions, which he foolishly wrote on a sheaf of parchment and stuck in his belt. Stop that, he says, trying to retrieve the rapidly dissolving document. You stifle a laugh. Ptolemy stands beside you, arms crossed, chewing thoughtfully on a stalk of barley. It's like watching a marble statue try to herd soup. You nod. A very shiny, poetic statue. I'll give him credit, she adds. He hasn't burst into radiant flames of frustration yet. Now, while Apollo wrestles control over creatures who care nothing for divine hierarchy. Let's sprinkle in a historical detail. Ancient Greek pastoralism was more than just goats and good vibes. Herding was an essential part of regional economies, especially in mountainous zones where agriculture struggled. Cattle, in particular, were tied to wealth and prestige. In Homeric epics, heroes measured status in oxen. Even sacrifices to the gods often involved cattle, further linking cows to power and piety. So it makes sense, in an ironic cosmic way, that Apollo, god of beauty, logic, and order, would gravitate toward cattle. What doesn't make sense is that he thought it would be relaxing. Okay, he mutters, wiping sweat from his brow. Time to feed them. He gestures for your help. You, Ptolemy, and even Hermes, still lingering like a suspiciously helpful raccoon, assist in dragging out baskets of feed. Ptolemy mixes a blend of grain and chopped herbs, muttering instructions that sound suspiciously like spells but are probably just farmer shorthand. You lift a pail, offering it to the nearest cow. She sniffs it, then nudges it over with a low grunt of betrayal. Sorry, you say, we're out of ambrosia. Apollo approaches the same cow and, with divine grace, gently sings to her. She blinks, and then she eats. You and Ptolemy exchange a glance. Show off, she mutters. Finally, Apollo whispers with the desperate relief of a man who just won an argument with a houseplant. Soon the others follow suit. There's something about the tone of Apollo's voice, low, melodic, tinged with that glowing god energy, that settles them. Cows lean in. Goats slow down. Even Hermes stops flipping stones over looking for snack inspiration. It's like a pastoral lullaby has wrapped the whole field in fleece. You lean back against the rock again, watching dusk curl into the corners of the sky. The first stars blink awake. The smell of wild mint and damp earth mingles in the breeze. Maybe I am getting the hang of this, Apollo says, still watching the animals eat in peaceful silence. Sure, you reply. Let's see how you do with nighttime duties. His smile falters. Nighttime duties? You know, you say, sheltering, counting, making sure none of the goats wander off and join a Dionysian cult again. He pales slightly. That only happened once. You can't prove that. Hermes pipes up from a hay bale. Ptolemy reappears, carrying a bundle of roughly stitched linen. I made tags. Tags? Apollo blinks. For the cows. Names, traits, behaviors. Helps with herd management. She slaps one on a cow's neck. It reads Stompy, likes figs. Hates liars. Another. Loud Susan. Will break a fence out of spite. Apollo reads them with growing concern. They have personalities? Ptolemy looks him dead in the eyes. So do storms. Doesn't stop them from being dangerous. You help attach a few tags. Marveling at the quiet precision Ptolemy brings to this divine mess. The cows don't mind. One even poses for hers like it's a photo shoot. Meanwhile, Hermes has wandered off to build a tiny shrine out of pebbles and fig leaves. When asked what it's for, he says, it's for luck, then adds, and misdirection. You decide not to touch it. Back at the shelter, all along. Open air structure made of olive wood and guesswork. You and Apollo guide the cows inside for the night. Some go willingly. Others need encouragement. One requires a firm conversation about boundaries. At last, the cows are in. The goats, miraculously, are as well, though one is perched on a roof beam like a confused gargoyle. Apollo slumps beside the gate. I have never been so tired. Try it without immortality sometime. Ptolemy says, tossing him a waterskin. He catches it clumsily, drinks deeply, then exhales. This was supposed to be simple. He says. You pat his shoulder. It's farming. It's never simple. In the darkness, the cows rustle softly. The air is thick with warmth and slow breathing and the faint, delicate smell of sun-dried straw. Apollo lies down in the grass beside the shelter. Just 5 minutes. He mumbles. Sure, you whisper. 5 minutes. He's asleep in 3. Hermes tiptoes over and drapes a goat across his feet like a blanket. You let your eyes close. 2. The night humming gently around you. The stars turning slowly like contented eyes in the sky. You wake just before dawn. The sky the pale gray of sleepy parchment. And the world still half wrapped in mist. Birds haven't started singing yet. The cows, surprisingly, are already standing, stretching. If that's what you can call the bovine version of limbering up. A couple are chewing slowly, as if rehearsing their lines for another long day of being cows. Apollo, still on the grass, has somehow managed to turn over in his sleep and is now using a goat as a pillow. The goat looks unbothered, which is either a sign of divine compatibility or complete emotional resignation. Ptolemy arrives moments later, as punctual as ever, carrying a basket of something. You lean over to see. It's full of medicinal herbs, sticky figs, and several small clay jars. We're doing wellness checks, she says. Every good herd gets them. Apollo, now waking with a start, blinks blearily. Are they sick? Not yet, she says. But this one's been mooing in a minor since midnight. That's not normal. You blink. I thought she was just musical. Ptolemy gives you a look. She passes you one of the jars and gestures toward the cows. Start rubbing this on their hooves. Keeps them from cracking. You open the jar. It smells like olives, beeswax, and regret. Apollo rubs his temples. When I imagined a cow farm, it involved more harp playing and less hoof bomb. You imagined a fantasy. Ptolemy says, already elbow deep in fig mash. This is the job. And so, the morning begins. Hooves are oiled. Horns inspected. Ears gently cleaned with damp cloths. The cows tolerate it with the long-suffering patience of animals who have already seen far stranger things. Meanwhile, Hermes wanders in from the direction of the woods, chewing something suspiciously crunchy and humming a song about chaos. Where've you been? You ask. He holds up a handful of tiny blue flowers. Scouting the perimeter. And foraging. Ptolemy frowns. Those are mildly hallucinogenic. Hermes winks. Yes, I know. You quietly take the flowers and hide them behind a rock. Now, today's historical tidbit. Ancient Greeks often mixed agricultural labor with ritual. They believed health, both of animals and land, was directly tied to divine favor. There were specific rites for calving seasons, harvests, and even tools. Some shepherds wore protective charms carved with runes or burned laurel to cleanse their fields of spiritual pestilence. Which is fancy talk for, they were superstitious and liked smudging things. Apollo, still getting the hang of it, tries one of Ptolemy's suggested rituals. Walking a circle around the cows while reciting a chant of protection. His version turns into more of a dramatic soliloquy, complete with harp-strumming interludes and the occasional quote from one of his own hymns. Is he quoting himself? Ptolemy asks, unimpressed. Constantly. You say. Still, the cows seem pleased, or at least confused into cooperation, which is sometimes all a farmer can ask for. Around mid-morning, things begin to feel almost normal. The cows graze. Apollo hums softly, stroking his lyre between feedings. Ptolemy is sharpening a stick with professional menace. And then, because Hermes cannot resist the gravitational pull of comedic timing, you hear a faint moo from above. You all freeze. You look up. There, atop the shelter's thatched roof, is a cow. A cow. Standing, looking down, judging you. Hermes claps. She climbed. She what? Apollo chokes. Ptolemy drops her stick. Impossible. But no. There it is. A cow named Gilda. According to her neck tag, likes clover. Hates everyone. Now perfectly perched like a divine omen. You sprint around the shelter, searching for any kind of ramp, ledge, or Hermes-made trampoline. Nothing. She flew. Apollo whispers, wide-eyed. She didn't fly. Ptolemy says, she had help. Everyone turns to Hermes, who's whistling innocently and rearranging a pile of mysterious crates nearby. Hermes, Apollo says, his voice shifting into that dangerous sing-song register reserved for smiting. I merely suggested to Gilda that altitude gives cows a sense of spiritual empowerment. Hermes replies, hands raised, the rest is free will. Ptolemy is already climbing the side of the shelter like an angry shepherd spider. She coaxes Gilda down with quiet authority and a sprig of mint. Gilda descends without complaint, though she takes a moment at the bottom to dramatically swish her tail in Hermes' direction. Apollo collapses onto a nearby rock. I am being haunted by cows. You sit beside him. At least they're not reversing time again. He groans. Look on the bright side. You say, they're learning obedience. They're not vanishing. They're not enchanted. Well, not all of them. This is progress. He closes his eyes. I wanted peace. Ptolemy returns, dusting off her hands. Then you picked the wrong animal. Now, here's an open scholarly debate to lull you as Apollo buries his face in a bundle of hay. Historians still argue over the cow's exact role in Greek divine myth. While bulls are associated with power and virility, cows, especially herds, often symbolize cyclical time, fertility, and domestic stability. The fact that Apollo, a god of order, struggles to manage them may reflect a deeper mythic idea that the natural world, no matter how beautiful, resists full control, even by gods. Apollo lifts his head. Do you think this is all symbolic? Ptolemy grunts. I think it's manure. Golden boy. You all burst out laughing. The cows, grazing peacefully again, moo in chorus. And maybe, just maybe, that's the closest a cow farm ever gets to harmony. By now, the rhythms of cow life have carved their own strange poetry into your days. Wake with the sun. Herd the cows, feed them, soothe them, scrub them, occasionally rescue one from an inexplicable rooftop perch or minor existential crisis. In between, fend off Hermes, who keeps trying to teach the cows advanced foraging techniques that suspiciously resemble pickpocketing drills. You, Apollo, and Ptolemy have found a strange sort of groove, like a trio that never quite harmonizes but somehow still manages to play the same tune. But today, things are hotter than usual. The air sticks to your skin like molasses. The grass crunches when you step on it. And as Apollo makes his usual rounds through the herd, something shocking happens. He winces. Not dramatically. Not like he's been shot with an arrow or had his ego bruised by a minor poet. Just a tiny flinch as he touches his forearm. You blink. Are you sunburned? You ask. Apollo glances down. His golden skin is, indeed, tinged a little pink. There's even a faint strapline where his lyre usually hangs. He blinks. That's not possible. I am the sun. Apparently the sun doesn't use SPF. You mutter. Ptolemy, arriving with a satchel full of supplies. Doesn't miss a beat. Your body's been mortal-ish lately. You're eating mortal food, sleeping mortal hours. Sunburn was inevitable. Apollo looks personally betrayed by the sun. But I am the light. Today, she says, handing him a jar. You are roasted chestnut. You try not to laugh as he opens the jar and sniffs the thick, greenish paste. What is this? Olive oil. Laurel. A little barley honey. Ancient skincare. Ptolemy dabs some on his shoulder. Also good for hoof rot. Apollo stares at her. She shrugs. Multitasking. Now, the thing is, ancient Greeks were surprisingly advanced when it came to skincare, at least. When they weren't rubbing crocodile dung on themselves. Which, yes, happened. They used olive oil not just to cleanse, but as sunscreen, moisturizer, and even medicine. Soldiers oiled their bodies before battle. Athletes used it before competition. Gods, apparently, just forgot. As Apollo sulks under the nearest fig tree, rubbing oil into his arms with a tragic pout, Hermes floats by carrying a cluster of fresh grapes. You okay there, big guy? He asks, grinning. Burned, Apollo mutters. Hermes gasps dramatically. Did the sun do that to you? You did this. Apollo growls. You distracted me yesterday. I distracted you? Hermes gasps again, even more dramatically. I was simply demonstrating how a cow could, theoretically, leap over a cart. One did, Apollo says flatly. She hasn't stopped limping. Oh, Hermes replies. Then I suppose the theory was proven. You step in before divine brotherhood turns into celestial slap fighting. We've got a full day. Focus. And that day turns out to be a scorcher. The cows lie in the shade. The goats, again, end up in strange places, on barrels, inside barrels, and once, somehow, under a barrel. Apollo, properly oiled and slightly less pink, helps Ptolemy repair the fence where Gilda the adventuress keeps escaping. You, meanwhile, are on water duty. The spring nearby runs lower than usual. You fill jugs, carry them back, try to keep the cows from tipping them over in what now feels like intentional sabotage. One cow named Pesto, don't ask, spends 10 minutes licking your hand before deciding you are no longer trustworthy. Eventually, Apollo joins you. He moves slower today, less godly, more pastoral. He stops to drink, then refills your jug wordlessly. You're adapting, you say. He grins. I'm surviving. Same thing. You walk together through the pasture, inspecting the herd. The sun beats down, but Apollo no longer flinches. The bomb must be working. Or maybe he's starting to belong here. At midday, Ptolemy calls everyone, including the cows, to a makeshift shelter built from olive branches and wool blankets. It's siesta time. Even Hermes is here, humming softly while weaving a tiny basket for no particular reason. Apollo sits cross-legged, his lyre beside him, and looks up at the canopy above. It's not what I expected, he says, eyes half closed. What did you expect, you ask? He considers. A peaceful retreat, harmony, golden wheat and gentle mooing. You glance toward the cows. One is headbutting a fence post in an unspoken argument with gravity. Harmony, you say, might be overrated. Apollo laughs. And it's real this time. Less divine echo. More dusty farmer at the end of a long day. He strums the lyre once. Gently. Then again. Slowly. A song forms. Soft. Sun-drenched. Slow like ripening fruit. Not grand. Not for temples. Just something small and kind. Hermes listens quietly. Then, in a tone you've never heard from him, says, "That's not bad." Apollo nods. It's cow music. And it is. Because, as it turns out, cows do respond to music. Real science confirms that slow-tempo tunes calm livestock. Farmers today still play lullabies in barns to soothe anxious herds. So maybe, just maybe, Apollo's tune reaches the cows too. They stop shifting, stop chewing. One even lies down beside the fence. Exhaling deeply. You lean back. Close your eyes. Let the warmth soak into your bones. And there it is. That rare thing. Stillness. Not divine. Not sacred. Just still. The heat breaks that evening. Not with a storm, because that would be too dramatic, but with a lazy, cooling wind that smells like olives, dust, and the occasional whiff of cow breath. You and Apollo are stacking hay under the stars. Yes, hay. The gods don't usually handle hay. But this particular god has made peace with itchy robes and straw in his sandals. I thought immortality meant I wouldn't itch. He grumbles, pulling a sliver of hay from his sleeve. Maybe it's character building, you say. He narrows his eyes. That's exactly what Zeus would say. Just as you toss the last bale into place, Ptolemy marches up, brows furrowed like clouds over a very stubborn mountain. We've got a problem, she says. You freeze. Apollo visibly tenses. What now? Is Gilda stuck on the roof again? No. Worse. Ptolemy says. Deadpan. You're out of grass. You blink. Apollo blinks. Even the cows seem to stop chewing for a beat. There's no grass? He asks. Not enough. She clarifies. They've eaten through the northern slope. And the southern field's been trampled by your musical experiments. They'll start wandering soon. Grazing elsewhere. Trespassing. And when cows trespass, you nod solemnly. It becomes a scandal. Apollo groans and drops into a sitting position on a hay bale. I didn't realize how fast they eat. Ptolemy pulls out a crude map of the surrounding area. You've got options. A few neighboring pastures are open for trade, but they'll want something in return. Cheese, milk, favorable weather. I don't control all the weather. Apollo mutters. That's a Zeus thing. Then bring them milk, she says. Or music. You're good at both. Hermes strolls by, just in time to unhelpfully offer. Or mischief. That's always an option. Not helpful, you both say. Still, it's clear. If the cows don't get more food soon, you'll have bigger problems than overgrazing. Hungry cows are loud, and heavy, and, according to Ptolemy, prone to fence breaking and spiritual malaise. And so begins the great cow feed diplomacy tour. You and Apollo set out the next morning. Walking pastures, olive groves, and sheep-sprinkled hills. Apollo's divine glow is turned down to humble farmer level, just enough to get attention. Not enough to blind anyone. At the first neighboring pasture, you meet an old herdsman named Oreas, who smells like time and permanent disappointment. He squints at Apollo, spits in the dirt, and says, "You sing to your cows?" Apollo nods proudly. Oreas shakes his head, weakens the meat. Apollo's lip twitches. We're not eating them. Oreas shrugs. Then what's the point? You barter. Offer milk in exchange for grazing rights. Oreas insists on a demonstration. Apollo obliges, plays a tune so gentle, so sweet, that even a nearby donkey seems to sigh. Oreas grunts. Fine. 1 week. Next pasture. A hillside run by a pair of priestesses who worship Hestia and believe all animals are sacred extensions of the hearth. They insist that before grazing, Apollo must bless their ovens. He agrees. They also ask for a minor poem about goats. He groans but complies. The poem is bad. They love it anyway. By midday, your arms are full of agreements, verbal promises, clay token contracts, and one extremely ornate scroll that includes a sketch of a smiling cow and the words, "Honor trade #3 inches" in extremely enthusiastic calligraphy. Historical side note. Ancient Greek land use agreements often relied more on verbal oaths and symbolic offerings than written contracts. A jug of milk, a song, a shared meal, these were binding. Honor, for all its occasional overuse in myths, was real social currency. Lose it, and you might lose grazing rights. Or worse, get a bad reputation at the symposium. By afternoon, you've secured enough pasture to rotate the cows through for the next few weeks. Apollo is exhausted, your son drowsy, and Hermes, who followed from a distance purely for his own amusement, has stolen 3 olives and convinced a squirrel to follow him home. Back at the farm, Ptolemy is waiting with her arms crossed. Well, she asks. Apollo hands her the scrolls. We did it. She scans the agreements. Grunts. Huh, the priestesses made you write poetry again. I rhymed bleeding with greeting, he mutters. Could be worse, you say. You could have rhymed goat with pope. Apollo turns slowly to look at you. I did. Ptolemy files the contracts in a box that appears to have once stored feta. Good. Rotate them to the eastern field first. The grass there's thick and they'll need a change of scenery. You and Apollo walk the herd gently toward the new pasture. The cows, as if aware of their expanding empire, move with unusual grace, tails swishing. Heads high. I think they're proud. You say. I think they're smug. Apollo replies. Like they knew we'd cave. One cow, Gilda. Of course, headbutts a fence post with loving emphasis. Apollo sighs. We just negotiated cow politics. You clap him on the back. Welcome to management. As the sun sets, you lie in the grass. The cows settled, the wind cooler. Tell me the truth. Apollo says quietly. Am I doing okay? You think for a long moment. You're still too dramatic. You say. You still think lyre solos solve everything. And you have no concept of manure management. He groans. But, you add, you care, you learn, you show up. And the cows. You both watch as one nudges another gently away from the patch of wild thyme. They're starting to reflect that. Apollo smiles, eyes half closed. Maybe I'm less of a god, and more of a herder. You shake your head. Nah, you're just a god with very tired cows. The stars appear, slow and quiet. You hum a tune. The cows sway. And, for now, the field holds peace. It begins with a bleat. Not a cow's sound, but a high, slightly slurred merp, echoing across the pasture like someone dropped a kazoo into a flute recital. You bolt upright from your nap in the grass. As does Apollo, who's been using his rolled-up cloak as a pillow. Ptolemy, already alert and gripping her stick like it's about to be used as a disciplinary wand, is squinting at the far fence line. There, bobbing in a slow-moving, slightly incoordinated mass, is a herd of goats. A new herd of goats. Goats you don't recognize. And among them, walking, no, swaying, is Dionysus. Yes, that Dionysus. God of wine, revelry, theater, and goats that appear to be permanently on vacation from reality. He's shirtless, bearded, and has a wreath of grapevines on his head and a wineskin the size of a toddler slung across his back. His expression is a perfect blend of, I've just invented something incredible, and, I don't remember where I live. Apollo groans. No. You sit up. Did you invite him? Absolutely not. Ptolemy mutters something under her breath that you suspect isn't appropriate for children's scrolls. Dionysus approaches, arms wide, the goats staggering in behind him like a drunken choir. Brother, he shouts. Heard you were farming. Apollo does not stand. That's a strong word for what's happening here. I brought reinforcements. Dionysus says proudly. Trained herd. Very well behaved. Mostly. You both look at the goats. One is attempting to climb a tree. Another is licking a cow with enthusiastic confusion. They don't look trained. You say cautiously. They look like freedom. Dionysus says with a wink. A goat sneezes and falls over. Apollo puts his face in his hands. Now, here's the thing. Goats in ancient myth were closely tied to Dionysus, symbolic of chaotic energy, fertility, and general unpredictability. In real life, goats were often used in Greek rituals, sacrifices, and comedies. The word tragedy itself comes from tragodia, meaning goat song, suggesting goats and drama have always shared a suspicious overlap. And it seems today, that overlap is about to graze directly through Apollo's painstakingly managed field. Why are they here? Dionysus? Apollo asks, pinching the bridge of his nose. To help with the vibe. Dionysus says, twirling in a small circle. Cows are lovely, but they're very linear. You need chaos, spark, hooves that dance. One goat breaks into a trot and headbutts a water bucket across the pasture. I don't need hooves that dance. Apollo mutters, I need peace. Dionysus drops onto the grass, taking a long drink from his wineskin. Peace is just boredom in a fancy cloak. You're making music, aren't you? Apollo nods. Then let the goats hear it. Before anyone can stop him. Dionysus claps twice. The goats, as if summoned by divine rhythm, begin to prance, mind you, around the cows. Somehow, a tambourine appears. It jingles ominously. The cows, predictably, are not amused. Loud Susan lets out a warning moo. Gilda lowers her head. Oh no, Ptolemy says flatly. We're going to have a ruminant riot. You step in. Okay. Let's all calm down. The goats can stay, but only if they don't bother the cows. A goat immediately starts bothering a cow. Dionysus laughs and falls backward into the grass. They're socializing. Cows need a little excitement. Think of it like a mixer. Apollo finally stands, brushing off his tunic. He's radiant, annoyed, and trying very hard to be diplomatic. Brother, please, we're doing structured herding. The cows have a system now. They graze in grids. Dionysus sits up. Grids? That's adorable. You know that cows love poetry, right? You blink. They do? They love poetry. He insists. I once read them an entire epic about a barley field and they mooed every time I hit a rhyme. Apollo squints. That sounds made up. Everything is made up, Dionysus says cheerfully. And here comes your open scholarly debate. Gift wrapped in grape leaves. Ancient texts rarely agree on Dionysus' origin or exact domain. Some myths place him as a son of Zeus and a mortal woman. Others as a reborn Zagreus. Dismembered and restored. His fluid nature, not just between life and death, but between order and disorder, makes him the perfect foil to Apollo's gleaming precision. So when Dionysus begins to compose a spontaneous goat and cow choral piece titled The Grays of Glory, you realize this whole moment is less of an interruption and more of a metaphor you'll be unpacking in your dreams for the next week. Apollo tries to herd the goats into a corner. They ignore him. You try to reason with them. One licks your knee. Ptolemy gives up and starts building a fence out of bad decisions and divine frustration. Eventually, Dionysus calls the herd to a halt by blowing into a pan flute he absolutely didn't have 10 minutes ago. Time to nap, he declares. The goats collapse like a dramatic improv troupe. The cows, slightly baffled, slowly lie down again. Apollo exhales. They're staying the night, aren't they? Dionysus nods, already halfway asleep on a sack of barley. Just till the next equinox. Apollo looks to you. You shrug. They'll leave eventually. Probably. And as twilight deepens and the field is filled with the gentle snoring of divine livestock, you find yourself smiling. It's chaotic. It's noisy. It smells like fermented hay and enthusiasm. But it's also, somehow, still beautiful. And maybe that's the farm life Apollo really needed. By sunrise, the goats are doing yoga. You don't think it's intentional. But 3 of them are balanced on one leg atop a fallen log. Eyes closed, heads tilted toward the rising sun. A 4th appears to be attempting downward dog. Or just napping mid-stretch. Hard to say with goats. Dionysus is still asleep, draped across 2 sacks of grain. A lazy smile on his face and a small snail climbing over his forehead. He seems profoundly at peace. Apollo is not. He stands at the edge of the pasture, arms crossed, watching one of his cows attempt to chew on a tambourine. His robes are rumpled. His hair has a bit of hay in it. You suspect he didn't sleep at all. I tried to read them a sonnet before bed, he says, voice flat. And, you ask? They mooed through it. Then the goats demanded a limerick battle. You pat his shoulder. You survived. Barely. Breakfast on the farm, such as it is a quiet affair. The cows are clearly exhausted from last night's spontaneous dance and ruminate festival. Even Gilda, usually full of rebellious spark, is chewing slowly and staring off into the middle distance like she's processing divine trauma. Ptolemy arrives, hair braided and boots spotless, looking as if she hadn't been knee-deep in goat wrangling 6 hours ago. She holds a clay tray stacked with something vaguely biscuit-shaped. I made sacred snacks, she says. Apollo peers at them. Sacred in what way? They won't cause blisters. Were they causing blisters before? Only if you ate too many, she says, setting them down. The cows sniff them. One takes a gentle nibble. Another immediately tries to inhale 3 at once and coughs up a poetic puff of barley dust. Hermes shows up late, as usual, carrying what appears to be a small basket of cow-sized garlands. I made accessories, he announces. The garlands are elaborate, woven with olive leaves, violet petals, and little bells. They jingle faintly. Apollo stares. Why? For morale, Hermes says. A happy cow is a productive cow. That's almost logical. You admit. Hermes grins. I had help from the snail. You decide not to ask. And so the cows are adorned. Gilda wears her garland like a reluctant queen. Loud Susan tries to eat hers, then immediately regrets it. One cow flatly refuses until Apollo personally places it around her neck and whispers something soft, probably a sonnet. She flicks her ear in acknowledgement. It's at this point you notice the offerings. They've been placed along the stone wall that edges the pasture. Simple things. A jar of honey. A tiny carving of a cow. 3 figs in a line. You look at Apollo. I didn't do that, he says. You glance around. The priestesses from the nearby temple to Hestia must have stopped by. Or maybe Oreas the herdsman. Maybe even local farmers who've heard whispers of the sun god turned shepherd. Either way, it's official. The cows are sacred now. Historically, this isn't unusual. Ancient cults sometimes formed around animals tied to specific deities. In Egypt, Apis bulls were mummified. In Euboea, a particular herd of cows was said to be watched over by Artemis herself. Animal reverence and divinity often overlapped, especially when the animals didn't misbehave quite as spectacularly as this lot. You walk with Apollo around the pasture, observing the herd. They seem quieter today. Maybe it's the heat. Maybe it's the snacks. Maybe they're plotting something. It's always hard to tell. They're settling, Apollo says, with cautious optimism. They're tired. You say, there's a difference. He watches Gilda try to climb a barrel. Think better of it, and instead lie down with a dramatic huff. I'll take it. You sit beneath a tree, sharing a biscuit. The wind stirs the garlands around the cows' necks, making soft chiming sounds. It's oddly soothing. Then Hermes plops down beside you, clearly full of unspoken mischief. I may have made a new offering ritual, he says casually. Apollo sighs. What kind of ritual? Not blood, Hermes assures him. Just barley cakes and poems. Apollo squints. What's the poem? Hermes clears his throat. Ahem. O sacred cow of shining flank. Your moo is strong. Your tail is frank. You close your eyes. No. Apollo buries his face in his hands. Please tell me no one's heard this. Too late, Hermes says. The priestesses loved it. They're writing a chorus. You've started a cow cult. I refined one, Hermes says. Big difference. Later that afternoon, the priestesses arrive in person. They come with baskets of food, incense, and a scroll declaring Apollo's herd officially, divinely significant. Apollo reads it twice, then turns to you. Does this mean I get tax exemptions? Probably not, you say, but you might get offerings. The priestesses bless each cow by name. Even the goats are offered garlands, which they immediately eat. Dionysus observes with mild amusement from a wine barrel, offering commentary like, solid diction, and, that moo had pathos. The cows, naturally, are unfazed, except for one, the marked cow, the one Hermes tagged with the faint, golden-winged sandal. She steps forward, sniffs the incense, and nods. You blink. Apollo blinks. Did she just agree with the blessing? You whisper. I think so. He whispers back. The priestesses chant louder. The cow closes her eyes. You suddenly feel very, very small. And in that moment, the silliness, the chaos, the sacred snacks and goat yoga, all of it, is wrapped in a soft thread of something ancient. Reverent, real. You, Apollo, and Hermes watch in silence as the herd, for the first time, moves together, unified, still. Then a goat sneezes and ruins the moment. But it was there, just for a breath, and somehow, the pasture feels a little more like a temple. You'd think that once a herd of cows gets declared divinely significant and receives offerings from nearby priestesses, things would start to calm down. You'd think that perhaps Apollo would bask in his accidental success and spend his afternoons playing lyre solos to contented bovines, while Hermes invented quieter mischief, like edible hymnals or whispering riddles to fig trees. But no, because cows, as it turns out, do not care for divine titles, and especially not too many sacred snacks. It begins with a low rumble. Not thunder, no clouds above, just a deep, rolling HRRRMPH that vibrates in your spine like a warning bell struck underwater. Apollo freezes mid-lyre tune. Hermes looks up from a half-finished game of tag the goat with grape juice. Ptolemy, who was attempting to reinforce the now slightly decorative fence, drops her hammer and says the words no one ever wants to hear on a farm. Stampede. It's not a full stampede, not the thundering chaos of mythical bulls charging down a mountain, hooves churning up divine soil. No, this is more of a slow-motion rebellion. The cows, led, of course, by Gilda and loud Susan, are moving together in deliberate, increasingly defiant unison. You blink. Why are they all walking away? They're going back to the northern pasture. Ptolemy says grimly. The one we closed off. It's overgrazed. Apollo yells. There's nothing left. Try telling them that. Apollo rushes ahead, arms outstretched. No, my gentle, sacred friends. There's clover here, figs, snacks. Gilda brushes past him with the casual authority of a bovine general who's already filed her complaints in triplicate. Hermes appears beside you, chewing on a reed. I think they're unionizing. You sigh. Can you stop them? Wouldn't dream of it. This is glorious. You follow the herd, Apollo pleading. Ptolemy muttering. Hermes narrating like a tour guide with a very specific sense of humor. They're not just upset. Ptolemy notes. Catching up. They're too energetic. They've been overfed. Not enough walking. No challenge. Too much worship. Not enough work. Apollo groans. They're bored? They're cows. Boredom is a death spiral. The cows reach the overgrazed northern field and sniff the dry earth with growing disappointment. One moos mournfully. Another tries to graze on a rock. It goes poorly. And then, because Hermes is involved, they find something. It's a small, rectangular structure, half buried in ivy. A shrine, maybe? Or a storage shed. Hermes squints. Oh no. What? Apollo asks. Hermes hesitates. I may have left a barrel of fermented barley in there. You look at him. Why? For an experiment. Aged cheese theory. And because goats kept eating my scrolls. The cows find it. They sniff it. One knocks it over. And suddenly the field smells like a brewery crashed into a cereal aisle. Oh no. Apollo repeats. Gilda takes the first sip. Followed by loud Susan. Within minutes, the herd is different. More vocal. More wobbly. One tries to sing. Another attempts to chase her own tail and ends up bumping into Hermes. Who calls it a surprisingly effective metaphor for fate? Apollo tries to intervene. They're sacred. They can't be drunk. They're not drunk. Hermes says. They're festive. Ptolemy is already herding the less coordinated ones into a loose circle. Clapping and shouting commands that sound half military, half lullaby. You, stop dancing. You, yes. You, stand up. Moo once if you can hear me. It's a blur of jingling garlands, holy mooing, and one goat trying to harmonize. And then, of course, visitors arrive. The priestesses, Oreas the herdsman, a delegation from a nearby village. All here to see the sacred herd. What they see instead is Apollo standing in a barrel trying to calm a cow that has somehow tied two others together using divine garland and what looks like Dionysus' abandoned sash. Hermes waves cheerfully from a stack of olive crates. Welcome, you've arrived just in time for the sacred moo dance. You consider pretending to faint just to escape. But then, amid the chaos, a strange thing happens. One by one, the villagers begin to laugh. Not mockingly, not cruelly, just warm, bewildered, belly-deep laughter. Even Oreas snorts and mutters. Reminds me of my third wedding. The priestesses step forward, watching Gilda attempt a pirouette and say, it's a sign, a celebration. What? Apollo pants, slipping off the barrel. A feast of misrule. The head priestess says gently. Balance to the sacred. Dionysus must have blessed them, too. And suddenly, the chaos has context. You see, in ancient Greek traditions, festivals of inversion, where roles were reversed, rules loosened, and animals were sometimes part of the ceremony, did exist. Some were tied to fertility, others to the turning of the year. Even in solemn temples, there was always space for laughter, for folly, for cows in garlands mooing in D minor. Apollo slowly smiles. A sacred festival. Ptolemy rolls her eyes. Only if they don't trample someone. But still, you help serve the fig cakes. The villagers bring out flutes and drums. The cows sway gently to the beat. A little calmer now. A little sleepier. The divine mischief fades into soft celebration. Apollo plays his lyre. A slow, gentle song this time. No sonnets. No grandeur. Just warmth. Just rhythm. And the cows? They settle. Bellies full. Garlands tangled. But content. They lie down in the dust. The last of the sunset turning their hides gold. You sit beside Apollo, who leans back with a sigh. That was a disaster, he says. And yet, you say, we're still here. And the cows are still sacred. He looks at you, weary and amused, and drunk. Only a little. The wind carries laughter, cow breath, and 8,000 stories waiting to be told. The field the next morning looks like the aftermath of a very rural music festival. Garlands hang from branches. Figs have been flattened into the dirt. One goat is asleep on top of a haystack, its hooves twitching as if still dancing in a dream. Loud Susan is snoring, her head resting on an overturned bucket. Somewhere nearby, a tambourine jingles softly in the breeze like the echo of a memory trying to sneak away unnoticed. Apollo steps gingerly over a laurel wreath and surveys the scene with the half-hopeful, half-defeated expression of a host after the party's ended. They didn't break the altar, he says, pointing at the small, makeshift shrine someone had erected out of empty barley jars and a cow skull with daisies in its eye sockets. Hermes, lying flat on the grass with a vine crown askew, mumbles, "Success." Ptolemy's already up and doing inventory. 2 busted buckets, 1 fence panel dislodged, 1 goat has a new tattoo. Not sure how that happened. You scratch your head. Is that the word, moo, on its flank? Might be, she says. Might be ancient script for chaos. Hard to say. Apollo sits beside you, pulling off a sandal and shaking out barley seeds. You know, he says slowly, I was trying to escape. To find silence, stillness. I wanted fields, a horizon, no worship, just quiet. You nod, and instead, you got a herd of cows with complicated emotions, spontaneous goat parades, and a brother who turns fig wine into religious philosophy. He exhales a soft laugh. Exactly. But you stayed. You adapted. Barely. Still counts. Now, as the cows begin to stir, less urgently today, their mischief worn down by divine hangovers, you and Apollo begin the morning rituals. No songs, no speeches, just brushing, feeding, gentle guiding. The simplicity of it feels earned, like a deep breath after a long laugh. The priestesses returned that afternoon. Quieter now, more reverent. They brought garlands again, but also small clay plaques bearing names. Not of gods, but of cows. This one's for Gilda, one priestess says. She's fierce. Another plaque reads Susan the Loud. Praise be to her warnings. Apollo stares at them for a long time. They're making saints out of them. You started it, Hermes says, now perched in a fig tree, casually feeding a cow an olive. You gave the people sacred cows. You played songs. You wrote poems. You let them watch. Apollo doesn't reply right away. Then, softly, he says, I think they needed something small. Something silly. Something that mooed instead of prophesied. Historically, this isn't as ridiculous as it sounds. Localized cults in the ancient world often grew out of something small, a well that never dried, a tree struck by lightning, a sheep that walked in a circle during the solstice. Sacredness wasn't always about thunderbolts. Sometimes it was about meaning, something to gather around, even if that something occasionally headbutted a fig crate. That evening, you help Apollo clean the pasture. He whistles while he works, a low tune that gently follows the cows as they shuffle from shade to shelter. I think I'm done farming, he says. You glance over. Really? I'll still visit, still care for them, but maybe I'm better as a guardian than a farmer. You nod. Farming takes a different kind of devotion. He pauses beside Gilda, scratches behind her ear. She moos softly, then sneezes on his arm. He takes it as a blessing. So what happens now, you ask? Apollo looks out across the fields, the hills, the paths the cows have worn with their steady, chaotic rhythm. I go back to the temples, the prayers, the prophecies, but I'll bring a bit of this with me. A bit of hay? A bit of humility. Hermes flips off the tree branch and lands beside you. And a goat. You're taking this one. A goat blinks up at Apollo. I don't need a goat. You do. Hermes insists. She's symbolic now. Apollo groans but doesn't argue. As the stars rise, the last of the priestesses depart. The wind rustles the garlands. A cow sighs in sleep. Apollo sits beside the pasture wall and gazes up. I came here to rest, he says, and somehow found more purpose than I expected. You nod. That's farming. It's not peaceful. Just honest. He smiles. And I'll miss it. And just like that, the myth concludes, not with a war, or a love affair, or a divine punishment, but with a sunset, a goat chewing slowly on a ceremonial sash, And a god learning how to let things be a little messy. The cows are still there. Grazing, mooing, glorious. A strange, perfect lullaby of sacred nonsense. Wind down, 300 words. The stars are out now. Quiet as soft chimes strung between the clouds. Above the pasture, constellations drift, slow, ancient, familiar. You lie back on the grass. The warmth of the day still in the earth beneath you. The breeze has cooled, and somewhere nearby, a cow breathes a deep, sleepy sigh. You feel your own breath settle. Slower now, sinking with the soft rhythms of the field. The distant creak of wood. The rustle of hay. A faint, lazy moo rolling across the grass like a wave that never quite crashes. Everything has softened. Apollo sits nearby, tuning his lyre by starlight. His expression calm in the darkness. Hermes snoozes in the crook of a fig tree. A goat curled against his side. Even Ptolemy, always vigilant, leans back on a hay bale. Arms crossed, eyes closed. You let your eyes close, too. There's no need to hold on to the day anymore. No need to chase the thread of the story or herd your thoughts into order. Let them wander now, like cows through open fields. Let them graze, let them drift. The wind moves through the olive trees with a hush, like the world whispering itself to sleep. And above it all, the moon keeps watch, full and quiet and kind. Sleep now, traveler. The cows are safe. The god is tired. And the story is done.